So welcome everyone. So welcome everyone. Thank you so much everyone for joining at the Indian Research Academy. We are very happy to host you all for the series of virtual international conference on interdisciplinary research applications. So today's theme is education, learning, experiences, and transforming realities. So now that we have so many challenges in today's world and our complexities are actually growing, so there is a need that we all come together and discuss not just our research, but also the applications that we are making and the reality that we want to create, so that any challenge that we come across, we handle it together, because we are not alone. We are together in this. And I think together we can also solve all the challenges that we are facing. So with this conference, it is an initiative to bring both academic as well as practitioners on one platform so that we all can learn from each other. And today we have a great lineup of speakers who come from both academic as well as practice domain, and who are going to share their learning and experiences. And as a participant who are coming from different disciplines, we will be able to learn through their learnings and their experiences. So I think it's not necessary that we are all doing interdisciplinary research, but I think when people from different disciplines share their learning, it naturally informs our work as well. So without much delay, I would like to invite our first speaker, Dr. Shaheen Motala Timol, who is from Mauritius. And she has a lot of, she holds many feathers in her cap. So she is the head of academic and quality enhancement at Middlesex University. She is an alumna of Global Young Academy, and she is also the chairperson of the steering committee of the International Network for Governmental Science Advice in Africa. Her research focuses on challenges and opportunities of cross-border higher education. And today she is also going to talk about internationalization and diversification of higher education. And she is going to present the case study of Mauritius. So welcome, Shaheen. We are so happy to have you. Yeah. So over to you, Shaheen.
Thank you very much, Shabana. Good morning, colleagues. So as Shabana mentioned, I'm Shaheen Motala Timol, and I would like to thank Dr. Shabana Khan and the Indian Academy of Research for inviting me today. I'm very happy and pleased to be here. I will share my screen with you. So as Shabana mentioned, I come from Mauritius. I was born, raised, and educated in a very small island. And I'm the head of academic and quality enhancement at Middlesex University, the Mauritius branch campus. And prior to that, last year, I was the acting head of the regulatory affairs and quality accreditation at the Higher Education Commission, which is the main regulator in higher education in Mauritius. So I've been a quality assurance practitioner for the past 15 years. And prior to that, I was doing research in chemistry at the University of Mauritius. And my research focuses on internationalization, on cross-border higher education. And I also look at quality as an external quality practitioner and as an internal quality enhancement person at the university. So today I'm going to talk about internationalization of higher education in Mauritius. And I will talk about Mauritius itself. I will present Mauritius and some of the background information and context that brought about this research. I will also talk about some factors that contributed to the development of higher education in Mauritius. And I will talk about coloniality. I will talk about colonial legacy and also about the state of being an island. And then I will talk about the development that have been brought to the higher education sector, internationalization, and present some of the information from my previous research. And lastly, I will talk about how coloniality has to be taken into consideration when we're talking about higher education in ex-colonies, I would say. So let me just introduce you to Mauritius. So we are a very small island, and we are located in the Indian Ocean. As you can see, we are about, I would say, 8 hours by plane from India and 4 hours from the African continent. And Mauritius is part of Africa, which is interesting because although we are very far from this continent, we also feel a part of this continent. But one lesser known fact is that Mauritius is not only an island, it is also an island state. So what that means is that we comprise of different islands. So we have Rodrigues, we have outer island of Saint-Brandon, we have Agalega Island, we also have the disputed islands of the Chagos archipelagos, which I think I would invite people to look into that because the history is not well known. We are about 2,000 kilometers squares, but despite our very small size, one thing that is interesting is that we have a very large exclusive economic zone, so which is 1.9 million square kilometer. So that's all around Mauritius and the outer island. So some facts about Mauritius is that we are a small island, but we also have a very small population of 1.3 million. This dates back to, maybe this information dates back to 2 years. And we have an aging population, and life expectancy is about 75 years, and we have a decreasing population growth, and this does have an impact on enrollment in education and in higher education throughout the past years. To understand the development in higher education, we have to take into consideration the history of Mauritius. So the island was not populated, but then it was colonized by the Dutch in 1638, later by the French, then by the British, and then we became independent in 1968. So this colonial past, it included slavery, it included indentured servitude. So the colonial masters brought people from India to serve in the sugarcane field. So this has led to a heterogeneous population, so with a diversity of origin, cultures, and religions in Mauritius. And however, there was no indigenous population in the island, so the anteriority of the French settlers on the island and their role in the economic development through acquiring the sugar monopoly. So that was used as a cultural argument to legitimize this dominant minority. And still they are dominant economically, I would say, although they are a very small minority. The languages of instruction in Mauritius are French and English, and these are generally accepted as the official languages for administration and business purposes, although the mother tongue of most of the population is Creole, which is derived from the French. When we became independent in 1968, that was also the period where a lot of African countries were also becoming independent. And we became a republic in 1992. And the process of decolonization had profound effect on on Mauritius and on colonized islands. So the history is quite similar across different countries and different islands. And so these distinctive colonial legacies have influenced our culture, socioeconomic development, and educational achievement. So this has shaped higher education as it is now, as well as our economy, society, legal system, and politics that were created through Western colonization. So as an island, there is a concept which is called insularity that is also associated with us. So for people who come from islands, it's not only a geographical condition, it's also a mindset. So when we speak about islands, especially from Western perspective, so we are seen as a place to be possessed, a site for subjugation and organization by the colonizers, and it is imagined as inferior or marginal. So Mauritius as an island nation ex-colony, it is distinct from mainland ex-colonies. So there are many definitions of island in the literature, and insularity is also seen as isolation and as a separation from the rest of the world. So however, nowadays, I would say that despite our isolation by distance, because we are very, very far from everywhere, so we are no longer disconnected from the rest of the world, because we can take planes, we have internet, so I will talk about this a bit later. So advances in communication, technology, air connectivity. So this has significantly improved connection, but still distance remains an inevitable barrier, I would say, to communication. And another thing that is interesting for small island is that we are now categorized as small island development states. And so these are recognized as distinct group of developing countries, so facing specific social, economic, and environmental vulnerabilities. And these are linked to the constraint related to our small size, our remoteness, and difficulties in achieving economies of state. So the consequences of being an insular, small, and colonialist, I would say, has impact on our economic development, but it has also impacted people in that they think of better futures outside of the island. And a lot of people have left the island over the years, especially since independence. So small states are very susceptible to larger immigration rate. So a new economic agenda was introduced in the early 2000s. So since we became independent, I would say we have tried, because we are very small, we have tried to be very innovative in our approach to economic growth and globalization. So we developed from a monocrop society and economy that relied only on sugarcane for export. And there was a high unemployment rate in the 1970s. So with this new economic agenda, we diversified our exports, and we started working in tourism, in textile, and I think other islands also adopted similar pathways. And education and higher education have become like pillars of the economy for development in the country. And there was a need to have a knowledge society. And the concept of being a knowledge society itself is still being probed by scholars, and that is through the lens of coloniality. And the concept, the notion of a knowledge society, like internationalization or globalization, it is not assumed to be neutral. So it is questioned nowadays. And since independence, we've had several governments. Every 5 years, we have elections, but we are a welfare state. So each government has introduced different welfare schemes to support the social and economic growth. And for instance, we have free education at all levels. We have free healthcare, free travel for students, senior citizens, and this has helped to mitigate the insularity effect and also transform our challenges into assets. And now Mauritius is a very, very well-known tourist destination, and we want to become a well-known destination for higher education also. And these, I talked about it earlier, two developments was distance, to overcome distance and remoteness, were air and internet connectivity. And aviation has played a major role in the development of the country, an enabler of mobility in and out of the island. So we do have our own Air Mauritius, so which services Mauritius and around the world, but we also have a lot of other flights coming into Mauritius. And this allows for higher education to have international students also coming to the country. And in terms of internet connectivity, I think that Mauritius has one of the highest penetration of internet in the country. We are very small and most people have access to internet. Now, when we talk about higher education, it's important also to talk about quality in higher education. So this is where the regulation of higher education comes into play. We have had since the 1988, it started in 1988, we had the Tertiary Education Commission that was set up to regulate higher education, to fund higher education, to look after research. And there was also a change in the Higher Education Act in 2017. And we had two new entities, the Higher Education Commission and the Quality Assurance Authority, that was set up to look after the regulation and the monitoring of higher education in Mauritius. So I was working at the Tertiary Education Commission and the Higher Education Commission since 2009. And all the above that I've talked about, this supported the ambition of the government to develop the higher education sector. So we have tried to adopt various strategies to transform Mauritius into a knowledge hub. So this is the effort that has been there for quite some time. And this is this main strategic goal would be the widening access and ensuring equity in higher education, to improve quality and relevance of higher education, and to internationalize the higher education amongst others. So since the early 2000s, we ambition to become a knowledge hub. And this is following the pathways of ex-British colonies such as Singapore, Malaysia, and also new countries that are engaging in becoming knowledge hubs like UAE and all that. But as I said, being a small island development state, the stakes are different. So if we look into internationalization, so what is internationalization of higher education? So I would say that the term that we use comes from one of the main known scholars that has worked in internationalization for a very long time. And so this is the intentional process of integrating an international, intercultural, and global dimension into the purpose and function and delivery of post-secondary education in order to enhance the quality of education and research for all students and staff, and to make a meaningful contribution to society. So the definition has evolved over the years, and the term that is used is process. So this is used to convey that internationalization is an ongoing and continuing effort, and it has to be intentional. And so there is a development quality to the concept. And also there is internationalization at home. So where you integrate purposefully international and intercultural dimension into the formal and informal curriculum for all students. So these are the two main concepts that we have to understand about Mauritius getting into being an internationalized higher education destination. So, becoming a knowledge hub or education hub, these are the latest development linked to internationalization. And many countries such as Qatar, Singapore, UAE have heavily invested in internationalization as a matter of national policies in the past. And also, universities are also setting up policies, setting up program to internationalize. And Mauritius is also following this trend. So we have been engaging, I would say, in early forms of internationalization for a long time. So by incorporating different international dimensions in the curricula. For example, the British model of higher education, which is the colonial inheritance, was adopted by the University of Mauritius, and we also use English as our language of study. And many of the academic staff have been trained in the West, and the local curriculum is shaped by their experience. And there are research collaboration with different institutions worldwide, and all these collaborate to the concept of internationalization at home. And even if students do not go outside or students do not come to Mauritius, the curriculum itself has been designed purposefully to integrate these international and intercultural dimensions. Why internationalization? So there are many different reasons for having internationalization in Mauritius. But the main one would be for economic growth and competitiveness on the market. There are many countries that attract international students, but it's a very competitive world. And this is why we want to internationalize our higher education institution also. And one of the, I would say, main way is that through cross-border higher education, so where you have people coming across borders, across nation, moving from countries to countries, where you have providers coming from other countries, mainly from the north, global north, I would say. For example, I work at Middlesex University, Mauritius. This is a branch campus of a UK university. There are a lot of franchise also programs that are offered in Mauritius. So we have these, and then we have other kind of research collaboration, for example, the Erasmus program. So there is this movement across borders of higher education, different types, people, project, providers, and the main one would be students moving across borders for internationalization. So in Mauritius, the higher education landscape comprises of two types of higher education institutions. So we have the public institution, which is funded by the government. And then we have the private higher education institution. For example, Middlesex, where I work, is a private institution. And so nowadays, in 2024, there are 8 public and 31 private higher education institutions. I think 5 years ago, there were about 46 private higher education institution, but the numbers have gone down because of regulations and all this. So the main university in Mauritius is the University of Mauritius. This was the one that was set up in 1965. And at that time, pre-independence, the focus was on capacity and human resource development to support economic and social enhancement. And that was across Africa, where they set up their public universities for human capital development. But now we have many other public universities that have been established throughout the years. And the government strategy has been to facilitate partnership between local university and private and public universities with foreign universities. So a lot of policies, programs have been established to facilitate these partnerships. and to drive the expansion of the local private education sector, and to increase access to education opportunities for local students, and to diversify the higher education programs. So just want to say that the population of students at institution in Mauritius, they can range from a very small student population to a larger one. So just to give you some perspective, University of Mauritius might have 13,000 students. That's not a lot of students, but still for Mauritius, because we have a small population, that's quite a lot of students. And for private institutions, so you have generally between 2,000 students, and some institutions are very small, very specific, where they offer only one type of program, so they might have 50 students. We also have medical institutions that were set up by Indians, and these attract a lot of Indian students also. So this is something that is interesting. If you look at the GDPR in Mauritius, so this is the gross tertiary enrollment ratio over the years. So how many students between 20 and 24 who are enrolled in higher education. So that has grown quite a lot. It was highest in 2012, where there was specific national policies that were implemented to attract students, but the quality of education at that time was not still, I would say, under control, maybe. So right now, we have reached a place where we have a high GTER in Mauritius. And if you look at collaboration between private HEIs and international institutions from different countries, so there are a lot of UK institutions that are collaborating with private institutions in Mauritius. So we have mainly from the global north, I would say, but we have also a few from Malaysia, from India, from South Africa that are working with our private institutions in Mauritius. So these collaboration also bring about the diversification of higher education, because you have all these programs that are being offered through these collaborations. So students will get a qualification from those universities. For example, in Middlesex, UK, will be the awarding body for those students studying at my university. And if you look at enrollment in higher education, so you can see that enrollment has grown in both public and private higher education institutions in Mauritius. But you will see that throughout the years, the enrollment in private higher education institution has grown even more nowadays. And total enrollment is growing. But we do have, as I said, an aging population, so less young people joining higher education. And this is why we want to have more international students in Mauritius. And you can see from the figures that since the last 10, 15 years, the number of international students is slowly growing. It's not very, very large, but slowly growing. And most of those students are in the private higher education institutions. So public universities also have partnership programs with, I would say, overseas institutions, and they can have with the Global North or the Global South institution. So these are the main public universities. So when public universities will have partnership, it would be in areas where we do not have these specialties. For example, medicine. University of Mauritius works with University of Geneva to offer a medical program. And the same is the Mauritius Institute of Health works with the University of Bordeaux to offer these medical programs. And if you look at international students in Mauritius, this has been growing, but you can see that the growth is mostly for private higher education institutions. The public universities serve mostly the local people, the local student body, I would say. So their market is the local student institutions. If we have a look at the enrollment here, international student, no, let me just go back here. So most of the international students that come to Mauritius right now, these figures, about maybe 1,000 students are studying medicines in private higher education institution, because you see we have 2 institutions providing medicines in Mauritius. And the issue is that in India, for instance, you have a quota system for students going for medical programs. So many of our medical students come from India or South Africa. Of course, they are local students, but many of them come from India and South Africa. And in my university, Middlesex, we have about half of the population, which is about maybe 700 students over each year that are from the African continent. So here we have the figures showing students going abroad. So in the past, a lot of students went abroad for studies, okay? But now what we have is that students in many cases choose to study at the private higher education institution in Mauritius for different reasons. We have 2 branch campuses. One is Middlesex, one is Curtin University, which enrolls the most international student and the most local student as compared to other private institutions. And we can see that the enrollment in overseas has decreased. People go to Australia, to France, to UK, to Canada, but they also go to other countries in the global south nowadays. And if we do a comparison, for example, if we take tuition fees, if you study in Mauritius at Middlesex, or if you go to study at Middlesex, UK, in Mauritius, the tuition fees would be like 1/3 of what it will cost you to study in the UK. The same applies to Australia. The cost is much higher there. So if we look also at enrollment of local students overseas, we can see there is a trend for students to start to go to different global south countries. For example, India. The number of people going to India has decreased, but Malaysia is quite popular. South Africa, China is also becoming popular. So there is some kind of diversification of where students are going, because Australia, Canada, UK, USA, France, the costs are becoming higher and students can afford that. So they choose different destinations, or they choose to stay in Mauritius in the private institution and the public institution. So I want to end my talk on coloniality. So throughout my research, I've been looking at the coloniality in internationalization. And what is coloniality? So these are the pattern of thoughts and action that in their various reconfiguration, they continuously and sustainably structures today's reality in former colonized and colonized society. So the general discourse usually portrays internationalization as inherently, I would say, beneficial. And of course, when we look at the figures in enrollment in Mauritius, for example, the movement of students from different countries to Mauritius, this has been good for our country as a destination for higher education. And indeed, internationalization has brought positive changes to Mauritius. As we can see, a lot of new programs introduced, students coming from India, from Africa to study in our institution, branch campuses being set up. So all these are positive development, but there are also issues that needs to be taken into consideration, but we do not have a lot of research undertaken in understanding the concept of coloniality in higher education. So in our globalized world, and this applies to small state, so we are influenced by international agendas and motivation. So internationalization is very closely associated to Westernization. And because the global north owns most of the knowledge products, the IT infrastructure. So we import all of this in our countries, and we focus on the transfer of the Western models, the Western curricula, the Western pedagogies, practices, and technologies for education, as well as their standard. Even our quality assurance standard, in most cases, is imported from the West. So when we attempt to become a knowledge hub or an education hub, I would say, the strategies and effort that we have done to internationalize, we cannot discuss this in isolation from Westernization and from the colonial history and colonial legacy of Mauritius, because then there are risks of reintroducing new forms of colonialism and reproducing power asymmetries in the system. So these are the things that I'm working out now. And because we are a multicultural country and we have different languages being used, we are a destination of interest for students from both Anglophone, Francophone countries, and we do have to use our assets to attract students, but we also should not forget about the legacy and I would say, not only having Western knowledge as the ultimate mode of knowledge among the colonized, I would say. So the government, this is not a debate in Mauritius. We don't talk about coloniality. I think that it has to be introduced in the context of development of higher education. So my research in some ways is trying to link the higher education development, internationalization, but also legacies of colonialism, and take into consideration that if we want to develop the sector, we have to take into consideration about social justice, because we've seen in Mauritius that not all population is having access to higher education. Although education from different level, primary, secondary, tertiary level is free, all public universities provide free higher education, but still there are some population in Mauritius that do not have access for various reasons to education. And this has to be looked into if we want to provide equity of access to the people. So thank you very much. I would close my presentation here, and thank you for your attention.
Thank you so much, Karen, for a wonderful presentation. And now I would like to ask audience if they have any questions to you.
Hi, Shaheen.
Current session.
Am I audible?
Yes.
Hi. So, thank you for the talk. And while you were speaking about the entire concept of internationalization, because though I have a very, very different talk, but I could just relate so many components of the internationalization part in my talk as well, because I feel when we also talk about the entire domain of internationalization, and that too cross borders. There are so many mini structures which are always in collaboration with each other. So like how you spoke about the Western knowledge system not being the know-it-all. I love that part. Absolutely, I love that part because I come from India. And all of our countries are closely related to each other. And having this
Yes.
entire mindset, you know, of a colonial existence, what you spoke, because I'm sure you're also aware that India was also colonized for a very long time.
Yes.
And I feel so proud to be an Indian because how well through the entire, you know, existence of transformation, we've been able to kind of keep that, you know, beneath ourselves, that the entire knowledge system of West is the know-it-all. So that's
Exactly.
something which I really wanted to appreciate you for, because that is one part of the talk which I love the most.
Thank
So
you.
thanks for
Thank you
bringing
very
that.
much.
Yeah.
Thank you. And you know, I was in India, I think 10 years back, and I was in Bangalore, and I was at one of the advanced centers for research. And I was so impressed, you know, with the technologies and the facilities. And I think these are things that we do not know of, that we do not talk about. And I think that if we have these collaboration with the quality Indian institution, because we have to also understand that there are institutions that may not be of the best quality. And if we have access to these types of collaboration, that might change the mindset of people also.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yes.
Anyone else? Yeah, Rajendra.
It is nice to know that there is a lot of diversity of students population all across the Mauritius. This is very encouraging. And what I, being a student of international business, what I can suggest to Mauritius is that it can become a hub of African and Asian countries.
Definitely. Because we are very well
And
positioned also.
it needs to be, yeah, it needs to be promoted in that fashion. And the design of curriculums, the design of opportunities, connect with the African industries, what they are looking for in the students. This will go a long way. I do this in India with different universities and institutions, and there is a lot of scope for further development in the field of connect with the industry and academia, especially in a countries like Mauritius. And it has not been done so far. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to share your thoughts, comments, questions? Also, Shaheen, would you like to talk about the interdisciplinary research in Mauritius a little bit?
Okay, so we have most of the research is conducted, I would say, at the public higher education institution rather than the private. The private focuses on teaching mostly. At my university, Middlesex University, we have a growing, I would say, research culture, especially in the technology field. And research in Mauritius, it has, I would say there's a tendency to work in silos, you know, everyone focuses on their own discipline. And so I'm not very knowledgeable, so I might not be able to say a lot about what is going on in the higher education institution. But from what I know from my own connections, there are some people who work at individual level, in different fields to come together to do their research. But there is also the government is trying to promote interdisciplinarity in the research and also in curriculum development. So, we do not have programs that are only specialized in one area, but there would be different aspects or different disciplines coming together for when developing programs. So it starts at degree level, and then you go into specialization at doctoral level programs. But there are centers also that have been open for research. So where you have, for example, chemistry and biology coming together and doing, because these are all interconnected, and these are the advances, I would say, that we have in our society in Mauritius, where you have different disciplines under the same research centers. So then you can work across discipline so I think that it is important that such structures are in place where you can have people, researchers, scientists from different fields, different areas working together. And this is where you will make the connection between the research. Because when you're working in your university, in your division, it's sometimes complicated to know what is the other people working on and how do I work with them, because you have similar interest, and this can the research output and outcome might be of importance and have impact at the end of the day. So having these types of structures to support interdisciplinary research would be something. At my university, there are talks now of, for example, of the technology and business and law people working together in research. And this is already happening, but it starts at individual level. So maybe there would be a need for at institutional level to encourage this through various schemes. There are, for example, we have the Mauritius Institute of Research Innovation and Research Council, for instance, that offers different types of schemes. So you get funding if you have interdisciplinary research. So this does encourage people to work together to address common, I would say, challenges that we have in the society. And beyond and cross-border also, this is something that is done, where you have schemes for local researchers to work with international researchers on common challenges. So these are, in a nutshell, what I know of. So I would not be able to provide much information on what is happening here in Mauritius.
Yeah, thank you so much. It was really very useful, and it's really great to know about the higher education system in Mauritius. And thank you.
Thank you for inviting me, Shabana.
Yeah. Thank you. And please stay here, because in the end, we will have some common question to all the speakers.
Right.
Yeah. So now we will move forward, and we will invite our second speaker, who is more from practice domain. So, and it is truly an honor for me to invite Marcelle Bernard, who is a renowned expert in transforming individuals and teams into high-performing and successful leaders through mastery of interpersonal and soft skills. So Marcelle has delivered programs to over 20,000 adults and 500,000 youth graduates in Australia, New Zealand, Japan, India, and Bangkok. She is a dynamic author of stand-up and speaker, where she combines fun with a wealth of knowledge in confidence, effective communication, and persuasive public speaking. And Marcelle is going to talk about one very important topic that most of the interdisciplinary researchers actually deal with, that is stakeholders engagement. So she is going to talk about stakeholders' cognitive bias and its hidden impacts. So welcome, Marcelle, and thank you so much for joining us. And we are so delighted to have you. Yeah, please unmute.
Delighted to be here. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay.
So, have you ever noticed that when you want to solve a problem, when you want to cause something to happen out there in the planet, out there in the world, that you need to get in communication with the people that you want to do the actions that need to be done? So one of the things that I've noticed when I get into communication is I have a thought in my head, and the thought is translated into words, and the words come out as sounds, and they float across towards the ears of the other person, and somehow they go inside, and then they interpret what they hear, and then they take an action that has nothing to do with what I intended them to do. Have you ever had that kind of experience? You see, I'm asserting that there is something in the way people think, the way they speak, and the way they listen that actually sabotages us getting the results that we want. And that something, I believe, is part of the design of all human beings. And I think that that something is called cognitive bias. Now, as people who are in education, people who are in research, I am assuming that you have an interest in problem solving. And on the court, problem solving could be looked at as making a series of decisions. So today, what I thought we could talk about was decision making and the detrimental aspect or impact of our human cognitive biases on our decision processes. And we could have a look at how to minimize those negative aspects. So we should probably start very simply. What is a decision? A decision is a conclusion reached after consideration. The word decision at its source simply means to cut off other options. Now, I know that you make decisions and that you probably consider, oh, you know, I can do that with relative ease, but let's have a look at, as part of the context here, what we already know about decision making. Some of you say, I make good decisions, and I know they're good because I have good outcomes. I'm going to assert that luck might play a part in that. And some of you might say, oh, no, I have made good decisions, but I got a bad outcome. And that often is true because the process of your decision-making was sound, but the outcome, perhaps some bad luck. If we follow a good decision process, then we can increase the likelihood of getting a good decision outcome. So as an example of good, bad decisions and outcomes, here in Australia, we have quite strict drink driving rules. And so there's a lot of advertisements on the television encouraging people, if they have drunk alcohol, to have a plan B to get home, a taxi, an Uber, a friend comes to pick you up, public transport. So take this example. A person drank an inappropriate amount of alcohol and then they decide to drive home. They drive home safely. They get home safely. The police did not stop them and they did not have an accident. Was that a good decision? Perhaps not. It was a bad decision that luckily had a good outcome. Let's have a look at the reverse. Imagine that same person who had drunk too much alcohol decided to catch public transport home. But the bus they were on got hit by a truck and they were injured and taken to hospital. Was that a good decision? Or was it a bad decision? Well, we could say it's a good decision with an unfortunate outcome. So the more focus we put on the process of making our decisions, the more chance we have of having a positive outcome. And one of the parts that people don't spend a lot of time looking at is the involvement of the various stakeholders or people who are either included in the decision-making or will be impacted by the decision-making. And if we spend some time focusing on that, we definitely will get a higher likelihood of a better decision outcome. And of course, if people are involved in the decision making, then there's a higher level of buy-in, so that the decision is then implemented and there's a much greater chance of it sticking. So far, what you may have noticed is what all decisions have in common is people. People are designing and facilitating the decision processes. People as stakeholders are engaged in contributing their perspective, often in more complex decisions. Different elements are weighted, so something is considered more important inside of the decision process than something else, and people are making those decisions. And of course, people are offering creative solutions. So people also impact whether or not the decision is implemented in their family, in their organization, and how long it stays. So we can say that people are integral to decision making. And that is why I say that knowing about this cognitive bias element of human communication or human thinking is really important. See, one of the downfalls of communication is when we assume that we are talking about the same thing. We assume that if we've decided on something as a group, that we've agreed on something as a group, then we can assume that certain actions will happen that put that decision or agreement into action. But you and I know often things do not go that way. Sometimes there is something in the way that we're thinking and in the communication that sabotages the outcomes that we actually want to cause. You know, when I was first out of high school, I traveled to Indonesia for a holiday, and I saw some salespeople on the beach. They were selling bundles of wood and beautiful colored fabrics, and it was all wrapped up like a project that somebody could work on. And I thought about, oh, my dad would love that as a gift. And so I purchased it for him, took it to him. But a couple of months had gone past and he had not, built it and showed it to me. So I said to him, I said, Dad, what's happening with the gift? And he said, oh, look, there's no instructions in English, Marcelle. So I was having a bit of difficulty building the kite. And I said, Dad, it's a boat. So you can see that he, thinking that the project was to build a kite, was getting in the way of his attempt to build it. And the moment he realized it was a boat, that it was to be built with the small pieces of wood and the material, then he immediately was able to take the actions. So this is an example of where my assumption that he understood what he was building got in the way of me being able to support and help him. And his assumption that it was a kite, not a boat, got in the way of his being able to turn out the results. So we see the impact of assumption. And what is the source of some of these assumptions? Well, the source is the various cognitive biases that we actually have. So human beings make thousands and thousands of decisions every day, possibly upwards of 35,000. Slow, methodical thought. With that many decisions to be made, the vast majority, possibly even 98% of our decisions are made using shortcuts, mental shortcuts, and we take advantage of the biases that we have learned from the past to fill in any gaps that we kind of might be missing in our information. So cognitive bias refers to errors in thinking. It is the systematic patterns of deviation from the norm or rationality in judgment and decision-making. It's when we think something and we don't realize that it blocks out other opportunities that possibly could have given us a better result. Now, these biases, these mental shortcuts, allow us to process information quickly, but not necessarily accurately. Our emotional factors come in, and other cognitive processes can lead an individual to make decisions or judgments that are not entirely rational or objective. So, cognitive bias can impact all aspects of our thinking: perception, memory, attention, and of course, our decision-making. And most of these biases are unconscious, and they occur without us being aware. These biases are deeply ingrained, and they are drivers of behavior that heavily influence our decisions. And while they enable us to make the quick, efficient decision, they certainly blind us to certain information and stop us from making the most valuable options. Here's what I want to make sure that you're clear on. Biases are not good or bad. They just are. They help us in certain areas of life and they hinder us in other areas. For example, there is a bias called the expedience bias, and it compels us to make our decisions quickly. And of course, if you are in a burning building, a quick decision will save your life. But if you are conducting a performance review on a staff member and you make snap, quick decisions, that could be quite disadvantageous for some of the people that work with you. Now, people can be conscious or unconscious of their biases. For example, a conscious bias I like the color blue. When I see blue, I feel relaxed and peaceful. There's no harm in this bias. I don't have to go to war with somebody who likes the color pink just because I like the color blue. And then there are unconscious biases that we don't even notice. And they come from our past, from our socialization, from good or bad things that happened to us as we were growing up. So cognitive biases typically are unconscious default errors in our thinking. They're a mental error. Now, sometimes we have something called an implicit bias. This is completely unconscious, and it's usually in the realm of learned stereotypes. They're things we're just familiar with that we like. If a dog, or that we don't like. If you had an ugly experience with a dog scaring you when you were a toddler, you may have completely forgotten that experience. And as an adult, when a dog barks, you jump and you're like, what? Even if it was a little dog behind a fence. So we have these biases that we're either aware of or not aware of. We have these implicit stereotypes that are impacting us. We hold opinions in favor or against something. And then, of course, those somethings can get bigger. We could have an opinion not only about our favorite color, but what if we had opinions about whether men or women were better staff members? Or what if we had opinions about different races of people? You can start to see this gets into the realm of danger for turning out great results. Now, I am presuming that these biases originated in response to fears. If we go back to the caveman or cavewoman, I'm sure it was very helpful for safety for us to be able to act quickly and immediately take action without having to, contemplate what we need to do over time. And that would have had people survive, and important in our evolution. Then, of course, what happens is that when we have a bias, we kind of can extend it. So the cognitive stereotyping will allow us to perceive an environment quickly, and then we fill in the gaps for things we believe are true. And then, unfortunately, we start to use personal characteristics like race, gender, etc., as markers for personality and behavior and other traits. And then if you think about it, the media starts to compound our stereotypical ideas, and often friends and family will bring us examples that are proof of what we believe already, and the whole thing can escalate into a place which is no longer serving our best interest or the interest of others. Now, most people believe that they make decisions based on conscious deliberations from the available information to them, and they believe that they use deductive and inductive reasoning. However, that is actually not typically so. So we've talked a little bit about the unconscious bias, the implicit bias, the heuristics is another one. So a heuristic can actually result in an unconscious bias being developed. Basically, it's a shortcut that just allows you to move quickly. And I'm not going to talk today about one of the most dangerous biases, which is bigotry. That would be when people are practicing prejudice and discrimination. And bigotry often involves strong, irrational, and intolerant beliefs and attitudes about individuals or groups based on perceived shared characteristics. So an extreme example might be somebody who harbors intense hate and prejudice against people of a different race and actively goes out of their way to make that other person's life hard. There is plenty of material written about that. We don't need to deal with that here in this talk. Some of you may even be sitting there saying to yourself, I don't have bias. No, not me, right? Because you don't have those extremely strong feelings about, like the Nazis or the Ku Klux Klan, right? However, it is super valuable to consider that if you are a human being and that you have bias, because the brain is designed to be biased. Your brain, my brain, each of our brains is biased. We could say, if you have a brain, you have biases. Now, if you were bold enough to take that stand, if you were brave enough to say, well, okay, what if I do have biases? Then you would be able to see how those biases impact your behavior. And then you would be free to choose whether or not you wanted the result of the bias or if you wanted to intervene on that bias and have a different result. And you could then share that with other people who are open to that idea. If we say that bias exists in the world, then we can assume that bias impacts our decision-making, our problem-solving, and together we can impact it. One of the most obvious places where you can see bias at work is when somebody's words do not match their actions. Somebody might say, oh no, I love everybody on the planet. I have no bias, but if you look in their office, they're only employing copies of themselves in some way. So that would allow you to know there was a secret bias at work. So we've already talked a little about where the biases came from, and an example that becomes very obvious in today's social media use is when we're scrolling through whatever we're looking at, we are highly likely to stop scrolling when a headline appears that agrees with our bias. But we'll just flick past anything that doesn't agree with us. And if you look at the world's politics, particularly the situation in America, you can kind of see people who are like acting like this or like this, not paying attention to any other opinion other than what they have already decided on. So let's have a look at why it might be worthwhile. 35,000 decisions. We want to use the best methods for making those decisions. But unfortunately, researchers have already identified more than 200 cognitive biases for human beings. 200. Now, some of them overlap, but that number of biases is enough to trigger information overload for most people. So there are a number of experts and thinkers who try to categorize the different cognitive biases into groups to make it easier for us. And look, they're all great. They're all great. The one that I want to talk to you about today to get us started is David Rock and a gentleman whose surname is Halverson. They have something called the SEEDS model, and they have grouped the 200 or so biases into 5 categories. And I think that's a great place to start, because it's not necessary for us to know all 200, just necessary for us to start to look at, I have them, let's learn a little as we go. Now, the SEEDS model, as in SEEDS, each of those letters stands for the following words: similarity, expedience, experience, distance, and safety. So I thought I'd speak a little about what those bias categories include and how we can impact them. So first of all, similarity. That is the bias towards what is familiar to us. Expedience, that is the bias towards what's convenient to us. Experience, our bias towards what we have already experienced. Distance, our bias towards what is close to us. Safety, our bias towards what we perceive to be the safest thing. Now, with the SEEDS in the background or the context for using this methodology, first we have to accept that we have bias. Universally, bias exists amongst individuals, and while they may lie under the surface, while we may not be conscious of them, we do need to accept that they are there. The second step is to look at how we can anticipate our biased behavior. And if we can label them, great. What we're looking for is any bias that's going to creep into our operations, into our decision-making, into our communication with others. Now, the third step involves actually implementing mitigation strategies. And we'll talk about those as we go. And then at the end of this talk, we can talk about some larger general ways that we can impact this situation. So with similarity, this refers to our preference for what might be called our in-groups, groups of people that we already share commonalities with. And by extension, it also encompasses the out-groups, people that we think we're different from. And often we'll have a slightly negative perception of persons that we think we're different from, the out-group. Now, this kind of bias is common to us all, but it requires special attention when you are working in people and culture or the human resource department of your organization, and any kind of promotion activities. Now, we could resist and just go, I'm just going to try and find a way to force myself not to do that. It's kind of working against human instinct. If we remove the opportunities for bias to creep in, though, that would be a very useful strategy. Now, across the board, we can broaden our affiliations. We can actually have the experience of a larger and larger in-group. See, I could consider myself a Jamaican-born Australian woman in her 60s who's an Aquarian. It's a very small group that would fit into that. But if I said, no, I'm an Australian, that's a bigger group. And then I could even make my group bigger. I could say, I'm a woman. That makes a bigger group. And imagine if I was approaching each situation from the biggest group possible, which might be, I'm a human being, or I'm a living being. I'm an energy force. That even allows me to include plants and animals in my group. And then you could see that I'm going to be making decisions differently if I have kind of expanded my vision of who I am. And then let's have a look at the second group of bias. It's the expedience. So this category is where our immediate, automatic, instinctive decision-making mechanisms come into place. It's our almost thoughtless decision-making, and it fails us because in the rush, we make poor decisions based on our limited understanding of situations. And to avoid this expedience bias or biases, we just have to put the brakes on some of our decision-making and engage in a more deliberate, rational, slower way of making those decisions. So if your organization wants to minimize expedience bias, well, you can encourage people to slow down. A manager of a team could ask the team to talk through their thinking process and how they came to the results that they came to. Kind of like back in maths when I was in primary school, and my teacher would say, we don't just want the answer. You got to show us the workings on how you actually turned it out. And that process was genius in the teaching realm. And if we apply it into our decision making, it will slow things down for the team and get a much better result. Also, the breaking down of our complex problems into smaller components will prevent individuals from feeling overwhelmed, and it will also allow decision makers to examine each part or each element of the decision as they go towards the final result. Let's have a look at experience. That is the familiar. You know, when you hear a song on the radio or whatever, and you find yourself moving to it, and it's often songs that you've heard many, many times. Often our favorite movies or books are repeated stories from the past. People are quite willing to watch the same movie several times. That familiarity is what we're talking about here. So if we are not aware of our personal histories, our biases, our emotional states, then we are not aware that they are being used to color our current experience today. So in this bias category, there are biases that you may have heard of: the fundamental attribution error, the hindsight bias, the illusion of transparency bias. By default, we move through the world thinking that other people have the same experience as us. They think we see what they see, what we see, that they hear what we hear. And in fact, that is the source of many moments of frustration when people are like, don't you get it? And actually, no, the other person is not getting it because they're operating from a completely different background. They are relating what's happening now to a different set of experiences. If we can step outside of our head, and that takes conscious effort, right, then we have an advantage. But if we fail to do that, then we will be failing to consider other people's perspectives. And thus, that's going to impact our ability to decide together as a team and implement a project. You know, mere awareness of your experience bias doesn't help you avoid them. Instead, organizations who are seeking to mitigate this issue or the effects of this bias, they're going to need to set up some systems. And we'll talk a little bit more about that later, because the systems provide the foundation for having people make the changes in this realm. The next one in the SEEDS model is D for distance. And human beings place more value on objects that are closer, either physically closer or closer in time, so more recent. And this primary mechanism behind the cognitive biases affects our tendency to regard what we already own as more valuable than they actually should be. So people would be like, you know, I own this cup, and we think it's worth more than somebody else's cup. And that's just a bias. We can imagine how that bias comes into play when people are negotiating to create something or to cause something. An unwarranted preference for choices within the physical proximity also is a problem. So if you're having to make a decision, but you're only looking for what's close, right? As opposed to expanding the thinking and looking out past the normal barriers to see what you want to actually use in your decision making or decide upon. So to limit the impacts of this distance bias on your decisions, organizations can take physical and temporal decision out of the equation. So we can take physical and temporal distance out of the equation. So for example, we could remove locations from the alternatives inside of a decision. So we're making the decision based on other things, not the distance, because sometimes the distance might be worth the extra advantages that we would get. For example, in speaker number 1, the idea of traveling to Australia is expensive and far for your travels, whereas having equal or better opportunities closer to home should be part of the decision-making process for students. And if we did that kind of thinking, then we're actually leveling the playing field, right? By allowing a larger range for our decision-making. In SEEDS, the second S is for safety. And this category includes biases like loss aversion, framing effect, and sunk cost fallacy, which you may have heard of. These biases describe the human tendency to place greater weight on negative consequences than on positive. We will do more to avoid losing $5 than to gain $50. And that's just part of our bias. See, playing things too safe may see key decision makers foregoing viable opportunities because they think it's too risky, or they may cling to current projects that no longer make any sense. This often happens here in Australia. A project gets started to, go from a 2-lane road to a 4-lane highway, but by the time they finally get around to building this thing, we're actually in need of a 6-lane highway. But they haven't let go of the old plan in order to take in and the new needs in the decision-making. So to avoid the safety biases, human beings can impose some psychological distance between themselves and the situation. We could imagine ourselves giving advice to a friend in the same circumstance. What would you tell a friend to do? Or we can pretend that we've already made the decision and that we're in the future evaluating what worked and what didn't work about that decision. So removing yourself from the decision allows for an objective assessment to be made with clearer eyes and less emotional attachment. So the SEED model, if we just summarize it, mostly to impact the bias, we need to put systems and processes in place. To mitigate the similarity biases, we need to look at other situations in which similarity has not been the best solution. With expedience, we need to play what's called devil's advocate, right? What if I'm wrong? What if I take the reverse opinion? What would my enemy tell me? So you start to see the different points of view. Then we have experience. So what about if we thought about situations in which our experience had failed us? Oh, I thought all big dogs were dangerous. But look, hold on, those 20 were not. And then in the safety realm, try to assume that sometimes when you assume something is safe, it's not. It was in the olden days, but maybe not so anymore. So we've covered a lot about various types or categories of cognitive bias. I want to move now to talking a bit about the decision process. And some people will be like, what do you mean process? Well, if you think about it, if you had to make a decision on whether to do X or Y, you might get a piece of paper, write a line down the middle, and have the pros and cons of X, so the advantages and disadvantages of doing it. And then you might even have the advantages and disadvantages of taking a different action. That is a decision process. There are more complex decision processes. You could imagine if you had 10 different options in a grid going down on an Excel sheet, and you might have, 20 different requirements going across. And then where they join, there's different numbers that measure the importance of each of those things. So you can kind of see your decision thinking process can be as simple as a pros and cons list or as complex as something definitely requiring software to turn out. So with decision thinking, or how I like to think about making decisions and the process, there are some things that will make your life easier. For example, if a group has to make a decision, what if you were to decide how to decide beforehand? What if each of the people involved in the decision could contribute to how the decision was to be made? Some people might say, oh, I just want to tell my opinion, then I want to hand it over to the experts. And then the experts can discuss, and then one super expert can make the decision on our behalf. That's a perfectly valid way to make a decision as a group. Others might say, no. One vote per person. Other people might say, no, I have a bigger share. I want 2 votes. You have a smaller share. You only get 1 vote. And that might actually be appropriate if you think about the different laws in property ownership, right? If you're, I don't know, if the floor space of your apartment in a shared building is 3 times the size of other apartments, you might want to have 3 times the vote in what's happening in the building. And that could be quite fair. So in decision thinking, taking the case that you decide first how you're going to decide has many advantages because it puts you all on the same team. If you can agree on that, you're no longer enemies. You're able to move forward together, even though you might have different outcomes you want to turn out. A second part of decision thinking that I think is very useful and is still in this conversation of cognitive bias is something called academic rigor. A different way of saying that might be expert input. If you're going to make a decision, you might want to speak to somebody about the legal aspects. You might want to speak to somebody about the political aspects. You might want to speak to somebody about the other areas of expertise required to make the decision. And that gives the decision that you're making a new level of credibility. And then a third area that we could consider in this decision-making realm is, of course, stakeholder engagement. The people who make the decision and or the people who are impacted by that decision. So, for example, here in Australia, we have a lot of oil and gas decisions that are made. Huge companies with just the most enormous amounts of money. And when they want to put a mining rig into the ocean, there are many stakeholders. There are, of course, the employees of the company. There are the management and shareholders of the company. But then there are the local people who are in the towns that will be impacted by trade. And then there are the people who have interest or want to speak on behalf of the oceans and pollution and the plants and animals in the ocean. So you can see we start to have a lot of people involved in this stakeholder engagement. And as I asserted early in this talk, that is a place where cognitive bias is going to make a huge difference. So in general, let's just look at stakeholders. Stakeholders in a decision can vary according to the context and the scale of the decision. And if the decision is just for an individual person, then it's obvious that you are a stakeholder, the person who's going to make that decision, yourself. But if you think about it, whenever you make an individual decision, there are other people who are impacted. For example, your immediate family. Family members who you may interact with, then sometimes close friends. What about mentors or advisors? What about colleagues, co-workers? What about healthcare workers that might be involved in with you in some way, or financial advisors or legal counsel or community groups? So you can see that a simple decision like, I think I'll take my child out of school and take them on a 3-month holiday, has more than just you and the child as stakeholders. The teacher is involved. They might have to provide extra homework, how you're going to go on your holiday. Are you hiring a car? So you can kind of see it escalates. Then, of course, there are if your decision is a small group, then each of the members in the group are stakeholders. There's direct stakeholders who are going to be voting. Then there's stakeholders that might just be impacted because they'll have to implement the project. I often here in Australia hear frontline workers, so people who are working on the cash registers or in the service window, and they are complaining about a new policy that was forced upon them without any consideration of how it would impact them. But they are stakeholders because they have to implement whatever the policy is. Then, of course, there's whoever's providing leadership to the group. They are stakeholders, internal teams, external partners, as in people you do trade with, people who are suppliers. Then there might be regulatory bodies or compliance bodies. They're involved. The rules you have to follow. Then there's the shareholders who own shares in your company or your group. You can kind of see it's going on. If your company or your industry has unions, then they would be also stakeholders. And then, of course, if we look at large organizations, there's the board of directors as stakeholders. There's the executive leadership. There's management teams, employees, customers, shareholders, investors, suppliers. It just very long lists. And if you start to consider why is there value in having all those people be involved? Well, they don't all have to have a vote. It's very difficult if that was the situation. But you can give them a say. You can give them a way to be in communication about what's important to them. And the value of that, of course, is new ideas that you may not have ever even thought of. The diversity of including a wider and wider group of shareholders, stakeholders, can only lead to a better decision, even if that decision is made just by one person in the end. So let's have a look at where those biases could be hiding in this decision process that we're looking at. I'm going to assert that the biases of the people who are writing the process of the decision will be in the process. And I'm asserting that the facilitator, whoever's leading the conversation and including various people in the conversation, their bias is going to be impacting the decision. Then, of course, we've got the stakeholders that we spoke of just recently. All of their different bias is going to be there. No, the greenies in Australia, they're the people who are taking care of, climate change and making sure the waters are clean. They're like, no, the animal rights are the ones that we need to look after. And then there's the unions. No, we've got to look after the people, the staff. Are they going to get paid? And then there's the communities and the local towns. No, we don't want, or we do want, whatever it is, they are going to have their own biases. And then, of course, the decision maker themselves, whoever they are, there will be bias. And some of them will take the advice of their advisors and some will not, right? Because they might be overconfident, the overconfidence bias, and they think they got it handled. They already know all this stuff anyway. Or they might have a reverse bias, like, that, oh my goodness, who am I to make this decision? I'm going to make a mistake. But regardless, those biases are all over the decision-making process. Now, one of the places that people don't look for bias is in systems. And if you've ever had the opportunity to look at the American system of keeping certain parts of certain people poor, you would have to say that there are systems that cause that. And those systems still exist today. There are systems inside of education that allow for certain people from certain backgrounds, it's kind of more easy for them to go through the education system than for others. So if we really want to have our workplaces, our environments free of bias, we have to be willing to actually look at the systems that we're dealing with. If your company had a problem with sales, you would not try to fix it by having deep, sincere conversations about the value of sales. No, you would go about it with training and systems and checklists and more training. So let's see if we can do that with this system that we're talking about here. I remember when I was in my first property, I bought a unit. I was so excited. I was in my early 20s, and I had ripped out the old kitchen, and I was having a company come in to quote for the new kitchen. And it was a big deal for me because it was an expensive thing to do, and plus it was the first time. And a man came in. He was the salesman, but also the designer of the kitchen. And he was about 6'4", which is I don't know, more than 180 centimeters or something very tall. Whereas I'm 5'3" or 163 centimeters. And he was insisting that the countertops be almost like above my belly button, really high up, right? Because that was the right height for him. And I said, no, I'm shorter than you. I need a shorter system. But he kept showing me on his list, no, we only do this. And I said, well, you're only making kitchens for very tall women. And the same with the cupboards at the top, too tall for me. So you can see where the system gets in the way of what's actually going to be productive for the customer. So bias typically also lives with the people who have power. And as I said, I'm not going to be addressing blatant racism or bigotry. But we do need to make bias visible for us to actually deal with it. And if we make it visible, then what we get is the full value of a diverse group of stakeholders and all the knowledge that they can bring for us. I don't know if you've heard about a system that was changed in the world of orchestras and music. The story goes that people just believed, in quotation marks, that men were better musicians than women. And that's why orchestras were, 99% men and 1% women. Until some very smart person said, I know what we'll do. We'll have a anonymous test where if somebody wanted to join the orchestra, they sat behind a curtain and they played their music, and the judges or the people making the decisions couldn't see them. So sounds like a good idea, but guess what? No change. Still 99% men, musicians, and 1% women. Until they asked all of the musicians to take their shoes off before they walked onto the stage behind the curtain. So the judges could no longer hear the clickety-clickety-clack of the ladies' shoes as opposed to the men's shoes. And from then on, there was a massive change. And probably it's a 50-50 now, where people are actually being judged and assessed on their skill rather than the fact they were wearing stilettos. So you can kind of see that there's that new system interrupted a bias that had been there for an eternity. So your human resource department is often the ones who are going to be in charge of the systems. And so for me, I do recall that I was working as a consultant and training and development provider. And when I decided to retire from that position, I spoke to the human resource department and I said, I'd like to add some requirements to your job advertisement, because I know you know what my job is, but I don't think you know how I've been actually doing it. And they said, oh, no, we know, we'll be able to. I said, no, what you've missed is I did not have any children. So I was delivering all the courses that happened in school holidays so that my colleagues could be with their children, right? And when I spoke to the human resource department, they said, no, I have children. It doesn't make any difference to me doing my job. And I said, who takes care of your children? And he said, my wife. And I said, does she have another job? And he said, no, she's an at-home mother. And I said, that has to be part of what you take into consideration, because you are replacing me, and all the other course deliverers do not have at-home mothers as wives. they have working mothers as wives in Australia. And so they didn't believe me. And of course, the people that they chose to replace me with over time failed because they were not willing to change the system. So I recommend the system be changed. So we've started to look at cognitive bias. We've had a look at decision-making. We've looked at stakeholder engagement. We've had a look at starting to make a difference. The only other part that I would add at this moment is we need to take action to keep people aware of their bias. See, while we can notice it if our attention is drawn to it, we immediately forget it when we're acting. And so the next step would be to put in place things that remind us of the different elements that we're dealing with, the different biases that we're dealing with. And that way, if we can have checklists, if we can have series of questions that if we ask them, they make us aware of our bias, then we can actually take different actions. It's not possible to have people not be biased, but we certainly can have them be aware of their bias and then take different actions. So the result or the resolution or the answer to this problem of cognitive bias is actually awareness, keeping ourselves aware. We can do the awareness through training. We can do keeping ourselves aware through checklists and having systems that support and reward unbiased behaviors. So I guess that's all I wanted to draw your attention to.
Yeah.
Is there any questions?
Yes. Thank you so much, Marcelle. It was really wonderful to know all these different biases that we do have. And we can acknowledge that fully now. So anyone has any question?
Can I ask a question, please?
Yes, please.
Thank you very much for a brilliant talk. I have enjoyed it from the word go. I have a few questions in my mind. How does education and a motivated, inspired teacher to bring about a change and to overcome biases from a young age, from the classroom? And if he starts making these efforts to make his students more open-minded, is it possible that the biases could at least be curbed or controlled, or as you said, through training, we could become more aware of it? So what is the role of education, higher education, school education, the role of a teacher in controlling biases? And as you said, we are living in a multicultural societies in multicultural countries where we have so many biases, religious, ethnic, linguistics, and especially even today, biases against women. So it is a big fight and it is a continuous struggle which will continue. So how do you rate education as a change maker?
Yes. So first of all, you can get a list of the most 20 obvious and blatant biases, and you could just spend a week having one of them be the focus, each week a new one. And that way you could actually have conversations with the participants in your class about the bias. You might ask questions like, have you ever seen this bias at work or in action? And then how do you imagine the person who was the victim of the bias felt? And then if you ask them, have you ever experienced that yourself, that bias? And then people get present to how they feel. And then you might say, is there an action you could take differently next time you see that bias at play? And what that does is it steps people through the actions for them to experience the bias, then choose a new action, then even imagine doing that new action in the future. You know, one of the things that shocked me, and I don't know if this statistic is where you are, but it was here in Australia. There was a bias by both male and female teachers to call on boys who raised their hand to answer a question over calling on girls.
Yeah.
And it wasn't because the teachers were negative. I mean, it could have been as simple as, oh, thank goodness that boy's got his hand up, rather than jumping all over the table. I don't know, right? But that was a bias. Now, if I was a teacher in class, when I noticed that happening, I said to myself, I will first call on 2 girls on purpose, intentionally, and then call on any selection from then on. Because I noticed when I did do that in practice, if I selected 2 boys first, the girls' hands didn't go back up again. It was like they learned a very quick and sadly limiting lesson. So I am a person who believes in proactive, kind of forcing the pendulum to go the other way a little bit more before letting it come back to a nice even balance, because training is hugely important. And that's the kind of action that you can take.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Any questions?
I still have my fears about how to make diversity the strength of society and how to bring about appreciation of diversity.
Yes. So once again, awareness first and conversation. I mean, even the idea of the point of view, that you have a different point of view from other people, can be taught to a very small child, right, all the way through. If you ask the child that is sitting in the back right-hand corner of the room, what do you see? What is available? They are going to describe something very different from the child who is sitting in the front or the adult, the student who's sitting in the front on the left-hand side. So you can do practical activities to have people see their new point of view, or to talk about perhaps these biases if they're obvious in a movie or a cartoon show or in a book, right? I remember my mother reading To Kill a Mockingbird out loud to me, which was the story of America and racism and unfair bias, just all kinds of bias. And then we could have those conversations. So we can use tools and resources like that. However, I can hear the frustration in making a difference in changing the world. And in this realm here, the bias, here's one of the problems. If you have lived your life suppressed by bias, other people's bias, if you have not been a 6'4" man, white, who speaks perfect English, if you have not been that, then you've probably had bias. If you're the first person to go to university in your family, you had bias against you. If you're an Asian woman, no matter how intelligent you are, you have that super young little dolly look, there would have been bias against you, and people would not have taken you seriously. If you're a Hispanic man living in America, short and slim, there are biases against them. People don't assume that they've got a PhD or a doctorate or that they're an astronaut. No, there's a bias that's from the appearance and the accent. If you are a blonde woman here in Australia, there's a bias that says you're stupid. We have this story that blonde is somehow more stupid than brunette, completely unfair and not based in reality. You can kind of hear these biases. If you are a Black woman, I'm going to use America for these examples. If you're a Black American woman and you speak with certainty, if you speak with force and conviction, you are going to be told to calm down. You do not have to be angry. What? These are biases. Now, if you've lived your whole life suppressed like that, if you've had to prove yourself more than others, if you've had to work 3 times as hard, right? All of those things, when you are the stakeholder, unfortunately, your mouth may stay shut and your hand may stay down because you've been trained by years and years of other people's bias that no one's listening to you anyway. I may as well not say anything. And that saddens me. That breaks my heart. And how do we interrupt that? Oh, I think that as educators, we can interrupt that by being a role model of confidence, a role model of competence, and inviting other people to recognize where they are competent and therefore earn the right to be confident. And that, I believe, will make the difference to the planet in this realm.
Thank you so much.
You are most welcome.
Thank you so much, Marcelle. It was really wonderful. And we got also present to some of our biases. So thank you. And please stay with us and we will have some questions common to all the speakers. And now I would like to invite our third speaker, Dr. Aadya Prasad. Oh, yeah, I just found you. Yeah. So welcome, Aadya. So Dr. Aadya Prasad is an assistant professor of English at GD Goenka University. Her work spans all verticals of communication with a focus on ESG, that is environmental, social, and governance communication. Dr. Aadya holds a PhD in human-animal studies and uses an interdisciplinary research combining literary theory, ethics, environmental studies, and sociology to explore complex social and ecological issues. And Aadya is going to talk about new era in education, merging intersectionality, ESG, and interdisciplinary studies. So welcome, Aadya. So
Thank you, Dr. Shabana. I am just going to share my screen. Allow me a moment. All right. Good morning, everyone. Good afternoon and good evening, depending on wherever you are, because this is an international cohort. As Shabana has already introduced me, so I'll not extend my introduction beyond. And I'm very glad to be having this talk with all of you today. And I remember my conversation with Dr. Shabana. As soon as she told me that, I had to speak on the new era in education, I was very excited because so I come from India and I have had all my education, my primary school, my secondary school, my undergrad, my PhD, my master's, all of my education has been there in India, right? So as soon as I got this opportunity to speak about the new era in education, I was really excited because as I'm sure all of us know, India's higher education system is one of the largest in the world in terms of the number of institutions and the second largest in the world in the terms of enrollment. The sort of diversity that we see, and not just diversity, the sort of diversity and the sort of demographic diversity, it is absolutely beautiful. Of course, we also have a lot of challenges with that. And I am just going to talk about that. I'm not sure if my screen is visible. Can you all see the PPT?
yeah, we can see the PPT. Please make it full screen.
Yeah, I'm just trying to, just allow me a moment because
It's just down there where you can see plus minus sign.
it says show grid, show small active speaker window. Follow me.
At the bottom of your slide. Yeah, on the right hand side.
Is,
In the red. Yeah.
Is the PPT visible, Shabana?
Yes, it is visible. It's not full screen.
Okay,
So
how do I make it full?
Yeah. So the next one, the button next to it, yes.
Okay, perfect. All right. Just allow me a moment. I have to switch this on as well. Just allow me. Is the small screen okay? Because I'm getting a notification on my laptop that it's not supporting the bandwidth since I'm connected from my university. Is the small screen okay?
Yeah, okay, sure.
Great, great. So we'll quickly get started. Okay, perfect. 1 second. Yeah. I hope everyone can still see my screen. So we'll quickly get started. So basically, understanding the new era in education. Now, as we today stand at the crossroads of rapid technological advancements, social change, and global challenges, education is basically undergoing a profound transformation. And this profound transformation, if I may say, is just not happening in India, but it's a global transformation with all of the different disciplines, like, the sciences, the social sciences, the humanities, branches in the STEM. So all of these things are basically going in a new era of education. And this new era of education is largely characterized by what I call the 3 principles. So first is the integration of intersectionality. Second is the ESG. ESG is basically the environmental, social, and the governance principles. And third is personally my favorite, and I feel one of the most important nuance to be dealing with in today's fast-paced economy, which is the integration of the interdisciplinary domain and the interdisciplinary study. So today I will be discussing these structures and highlight the crucial role of liberal arts education in this evolving space. After this, we move to the next slide, which basically talks about the current trends and the current challenges. Now, in this entire thing, education is today facing a unique set of challenges and opportunities. And out of all of these unique set of challenges and opportunities, technological advancements, if I may say, it sits at the top of the hierarchy. The rise of digital technologies, for example, ChatGPT, for example, AI, and the online learning platforms is reshaping how we teach, how we learn. It's also reshaping how we think and how we speak. So all of these tools offer incredible opportunities for accessibility and personalized learning, but then these are the same tools which are also posing challenges in ensuring equity and maintaining human connections in education. Now, I'm not saying this because, I'm someone from the entire space of liberal arts and social sciences and humanities. I feel in today's world, especially after the pandemic, post-pandemic, you call it any stream, any country, any geography, any community. If that entire stream or community or country is devoid out of the human connection in education, that education is not holistic. And that is also where the entire understanding of intersectionality steps in. The entire understanding of what is a interdisciplinary domain steps in. And of course, we are going to also talk about this later. The next is globalization. In an increasingly interconnected world, students must be prepared to navigate the diverse cultures and the global issues throughout the planet. And this requires an education system that not only imparts knowledge, but it is also fostering things like critical thinking, empathy, cross-cultural communication skills. Now, all of us, I'm sure, all of us have heard these things multiple times, like, since school, that what is critical thinking, what is empathy, and what is the entire understanding of cross-cultural communication skills. And all of these are also things which have been a part of almost all the formal and the informal curriculums, right? But it is very, very important to really understand this, not just read it, not just hear it outright, but really have all of these 3 components into, intricately festered into the education system when we talk about a global planet, or, when we talk about transforming reality in the entire space of education. After this, we have the next point, which is basically social and the environmental challenges. Now, issues such as the climate change, the social justice, and the economic equality demand that the education prepares its students to be responsible, ethical, and proactive citizens. This, again, is a very, very crucial point, because the entire idea behind educating the citizen of a country is not and cannot just be rote learning. We also have to teach the next generation. We also have to teach the present generation. What does it mean to be responsible? What does it mean to be ethical? And definitely, what does it mean to be proactive? Not just as a citizen, but also in your entire education experience. And the traditional models of education, which were largely focused primarily on the technical skills and rote learning, are definitely insufficient, to meet such demands. Now, the question is that why is there the actual need of a new approach in education, or why there should be? I personally feel that, it is one of the biggest research gaps that very few countries or economies or individuals, are also trying to fill in from a very, very holistic perspective. And that is the reason I was so glad when I was called on for this opportunity by Dr. Shabana, because we really need to understand as educators, even as housewives, even if you're not an educator, I think as a human being, we really need to understand that there has to be a new paradigm, a new approach for education. Because with all of these challenges coming in, chat, GPT, AI, all of these things, we definitely need a new approach to education. We need a new approach to think. We need a new approach to, I would not say relearn, but firstly unlearn. And this new approach is something which has to be sustainable. It has to be inclusive. It has to be interdisciplinary. It cannot exist. No new technique, no new approach in education can exist without all of these things, three things. And let me now elaborate on why, this is essential, and how liberal arts discipline plays a critical role in fostering this. So this is the next slide. It basically talks about the importance of liberal arts education. So liberal arts education encompasses the humanities, the social sciences, the natural sciences, right? And is foundational to the new approach. With an education in liberal arts, mostly in liberal arts, an individual is exposed to things like critical thinking, problem solving. Liberal arts discipline emphasize critical thinking, creativity, ability to analyze complex problems from absolutely different perspectives. And these are skills which are also crucial in addressing the multifaceted challenges of our time, because these are not singular times. All of us actually as human beings are living in plural realities. And in order to operate in plural realities, in order to make sure that our functionality is at the zest, we cannot not have the entire importance of liberal arts. And why I have specially put this in my slides, because the entire utility of an education which is based out of liberal arts, unfortunately, very unfortunately, is closing in the world. It's just not, a situation of India. If you especially look into what is happening in the US, if you look into what is happening in Canada, universities, departments are shutting down. And these are actual innate departments which should not shut down, because without the understanding of liberal arts, anyone cannot exist or function to their best utility in a situation, in a job, also in a department. Also, the second thing that, we really learn is ethical reasoning and social responsibility. When your child takes on courses in English, in philosophy, in sociology, in history, for example, it really helps the students to develop a deep understanding of the ethical principles and the social dynamics. And this is absolutely essential for fostering a sense of responsibility and also for fostering a sense of citizenship. And now the next point is communication and interpersonal skills. The study of literature, the study of languages, and the arts enhances a student's ability to communicate effectively and with empathy, with sympathy. These are skills all of these skills are vital in a world where collaboration and cultural competence is the key. 20 years back from now, people used to hire each other only basis their competency. But that's not the situation now, because every other human being, every second person you meet is either equally competent as you are, or perhaps more, if I may say that, right? So how is it that your competency, your interpersonal skill is going to be something different, is going to be something absolutely distinctive? That is when you actually start developing that cultural competency, that social competency, that sociological competency. And you can't do that if you as an institution, if you as a community, if you as a government, if you as a country are shutting down courses in humanities and social sciences. It's not possible. You cannot teach a citizen to exist with their full functionality. And that is the reason I would say that communication and interpersonal skills are also one of the absolute brand new ways of looking into the new education policy, also of looking into how to bring transformation in the education realm. After this, we have the interdisciplinary connections. So liberal arts education encourages the students to make connections across various disciplines. And this interdisciplinary mindset is exactly what is needed to innovate and solve the complex global problems of the world all of us are facing today. Now, very quickly moving on to the next slide, which is slide number 5. So this slide is basically going to talk about integrating emotional intelligence, nutrition, and health. Now, this is something which, I mean, I'm not sure, how the education system of any other country intricately functions except India. But what is something which I've seen, and if I may say so, integrating emotional intelligence in a course curriculum, either it's in school or it's in the university spaces, it's very, very, very important. And a lot of Western universities, a lot of Western countries. So when we talk about the, global north, a lot of these places in their entire curriculum, especially in the last 10 years, have had a more value of emotional intelligence and nutrition and health. And the same trend has also been there in Asian countries. And this entire integration is one of the keystones of education. It is one of the keystones in understanding that you cannot talk about any transformation. You cannot talk about bringing in any new reality unless and until your citizens, your students, your families, and you as an individual is not rooted in the ethics, in the nuance, in the political aspect of emotional intelligence. So liberal arts disciplines, students who basically study liberal arts as a research factor are prone to shown a new era of education, are prone to shown emotional intelligence quotient on a higher side. Emotional intelligence is basically involving the ability to understand and to manage one's emotions and the emotions of others. Incorporating EQ into the curriculum will help your child to develop empathy, resilience, and effective communication skills. These are key competencies, and these key competencies are absolutely crucial for personal and professional development. And next is nutrition and health. Just check if this is on the once it just change the slide. This is the next slide. It is basically nutrition and health. So good health and nutrition are fundamental to effective learning and overall well-being. And why I've written this point here, because this is one point which is not easily accessible in a lot of courses. Unless and until you do not take up a course in home science, you cannot learn about nutrition and health. And I've been in the education industry since last 8 years. And this is one common thing that, I've seen. Irrespective of the fact that, you are in which stream or domain, These are few common denominators which every child, which every student, which every scholar should know. And these are things which should be absolutely intersectional or interdisciplinary, these subjects, the study of these subjects. So one is emotional intelligence, which is still found in the West and in the East alike. But one is, is nutrition and health, which is, it's not easily accessible in a lot of pan-university courses, which are not only focusing on social sciences or nutrition and health. And good health and nutrition are fundamental to effective learning and overall well-being. Because especially after the pandemic, and even in the pandemic, right? Everyone, almost every second person is having a lot of mental challenges. People are dealing with so many things mentally. They are emotionally struggling, they are mentally struggling. And my point here is, so while I'm talking to myself, I'm also talking to you. And I also want to engage with all of you on this question. When we are talking about education, when we talk about a new paradigm of education, a new reality, how will this education ever be useful to us also, unless and until we do not understand the very basic things? What's the point of me going to work if I'm not mentally okay? What's the point of me doing anything if my mental health and well-being is not with me? And that is the reason it is so imperative to include these courses and create a new course of knowledge. And nutrition and health is one of the most important, foremost courses after emotional intelligence. Also, these courses can improve the academic performance and long-term health outcomes and the long-term longevity of scholars, of students, of individuals. And schools and universities, I feel, should definitely be providing the resources and the support to promote mental health and well-being, because I'm sure all universities, have these programs on and off on mental health, on this, on that, but what's the point? If someone who is in the STEM, if someone who's studying physics, if someone who's studying mathematics, that person will not have this imbibed in their course curricula. And us just giving them, these talks or these seminars just once a year, or just on the mental health day, what's the point? Well, there is none. And that is the reason it is very, very important to be integrating the intersectionality of these various disciplines into one. Now, very quickly moving on to slide number 7, which is going to talk about understanding intersectionality. And one second. One second. Yeah. So when we talk about understanding intersectionality as a terminology, it is basically a term which is coined by Kimberly Crenshaw, and Crenshaw also happens to be one of my most favorite, authors to be ever quoting. But Crenshaw is basically referring to the interconnected nature of social categorizations. So Crenshaw was the first person who coined intersectionality. Crenshaw is basically telling us that all of these social categorizations like race, like gender, like class, they all create overlapping systems of discrimination and disadvantage. How do we bridge this? How do we bridge this gap? We actually bridge this gap by exploring the concept of intersectionality, and not just exploring the concept of intersectionality in isolation. You can't do that, because in today's times, you cannot. We have actually reached such fast and such dynamic times that it would not be correct to, actually study anything in isolation. So the concept of intersectionality and its relevance also has to be in education, and how merging the entire concept of intersectionality, with various disciplines, can create a more inclusive, innovative, equity educational landscape. I've already taken all of us through the entire definition and origin of intersectionality. What is the importance of intersectionality in education? In the context of education, intersectionality is crucial for understanding and addressing the diverse experiences and needs of students. Recognizing intersectionality means acknowledging that students are not defined by a single identity and by a complex interplay of various factors. Well, what does that mean? You cannot pick students and place them in groups because that will not be able to determine their full functionality. What's the solution? The solution is acknowledging that your sample size, your students are not defined by one singular identity, but by a complex interplay of various factors. And only this understanding can lead to a more inclusive, demographically inclusive as well, equity-based educational practice. I think in the last, if I remember, in the last 7 to 8 years, I would have not even attended one single seminar or talk or lecture, anything, wherein, the speaker has not touched upon inclusivity and diversity. Every organization, every university, every corporate organization, also every school has this, in their book that you have to touch upon inclusiveness. You have to touch upon equity. But the question is, I'm sure a lot of us on this panel are from the education industry. The question is, both you and I know the reality. To what extent is it just for the outside world, and to what extent are we really, really using Cranshaw's intersectionality? And why is it very important to be doing this? It's just not a favor for us, but it's also something that, we are trying to create a space of equity in the world by acknowledging the singular identity of every person through the lens of intersectionality as it is and as it should be, because these are human beings we're talking about. We are not talking about non-living things here. Like, we're not talking about my phone here, that this is just OnePlus, whatever, and it's going to have a different set of features as compared to someone who's using an iPhone. These are human beings, these are lives. And if we have to understand these lives, what better space than education? If you are an educator, this is the first step. Understanding the nuance, understanding the politics of intersectionality. Moving to slide number 8. So this slide is basically going to talk about implementing the intersectionality in education. Now that we've understood कि intersectionality क्या होती है, now that we've understood that what intersectionality is, will we go on? How can we implement this intersectionality in education? So one is curriculum development, diverse perspectives. Developing a curriculum that reflects intersectionality means including diverse perspectives and voices in course materials. This can be achieved through literature that covers various cultural experiences, history courses that highlight multiple viewpoints, and science courses that discuss the contributions of scientists from diverse backgrounds. So I'm just getting reminded of one very small example. A couple of years back, I think this was when I was doing my master's. I was just referring to one of the courses of another country on gender studies. I was just looking at that course and I was amazed. I would not want to name the country, but I was amazed to see a course on gender studies, a course on LGBTQ. Not one text that course has which is written by someone who identifies as an LGBTQ. All the texts that are written from so-called the perspective of the white gaze. And that is the reason I personally have never been, at all been fascinated by the Western education. I'm so fortunate to also be born in a country like India, because India is leading the education space like no other country. And I would just say that. Because the entire curriculum development, and I think it's time, all of us as Asians on this call, and I know that, we're just not Asians on this call as well. So please bear with me, for that. But all of us as Asians on this call, it's time we realize that curriculum development cannot be from the perspective of the white male gaze. Absolutely no, it just cannot be. Just no. And when we talk about a diverse perspective is just not the white perspective. A diverse perspective is a brown perspective. A diverse perspective is a black perspective. And being an educator, that is one of the most important things to understand, and not understand, also implement. Guys, please allow me a moment. I'm on a call. And the next point is teaching practices, inclusive methods. Educators can adopt teaching practices that are inclusive and responsive to the diverse needs of students. And this includes absolutely using varied teaching methods to accommodate different learning styles, creating a classroom environment where all students feel valued and respected, and being mindful to the different challenges that the students may face. And the very last point for this is institutional policies, which I also feel is one of the most important points, because we cannot bring any change in education unless and until, we are not addressing the, one second, what's wrong with my screen? Okay, yeah. Unless and until, the institutions are not acknowledging, these policies. So equity and inclusion is the next thing, which is the most important thing. Now, very quickly moving on to slide number 9, because I have a lot of slides. This is intersectionality between the science streams and the liberal arts stream. This is one of my favorite slides, and this is where my entire heart is also there. So intersectionality between the sciences and the liberal arts is one thing which I feel should be, the most pertinent things of all the universities, because unless and until there is no intersectionality between the sciences and the liberal arts, the education industry, the evolving education concepts, it is going to be very, very difficult to move ahead. Now, bridging disciplines, what does that mean? First point is holistic education. Integration of the sciences and the liberal arts is a powerful example of interdisciplinary or intersectionality in education. When you're bringing two diverse perspectives, this is the sciences and this is the arts, and we have a complex problem in between. And how are we going to look at it? If this is the problem, how are we going to approach this problem? We are only going to look at it from both the perspectives. And by merging these intersectional fields and these separate fields, we can actually create a more holistic and enriched learning experience for our students. Point number 2 is critical thinking and innovation, interdisciplinary approach. Sciences often offer us analytical skills, empirical methods, and technical knowledge. And courses like liberal arts can always also provide critical thinking, ethical reasoning, and a deeper understanding of human culture and society. Together, both of these disciplines foster innovation and a comprehensive problem-solving ability. Third is the real-world, applications. Things like complex issues, addressing the complex global issues like climate change. Climate change, I think, is one of the most grand narratives, since the last few years. And I'm sure all of us are aware how many different types of communities, people, individual organizations are trying to solve this complex issue of climate change. And yet we are not on any one consensus. And one of the biggest drawbacks, I feel, is that we are not looking at this issue intricately from all perspectives together. And that is the reason intersectionality between the sciences and the liberal arts is a very, very important place to stand in and to operate from. Because all the solutions that we get out of actually, creating this structure is going to be ethical and it is going to be effective. And courses that combine environmental science with social justice, all of these issues are prime examples of how this interdisciplinary approach can be applied. Moving ahead.
Aadya, sorry, we have some time constraint and it's already 11:56. So if you could.
How much time do I have? So I know. I'm in check of my.
Yeah, if you can just give us concluding remarks or something.
Perfect. So after this, I will quickly move to not this slide, not this slide. I will move to the most important part of my presentation, which is understanding interdisciplinary studies, which is, these are just 2 slides. Just allow me a moment. Sorry, I never realized how much time I took. Actually, I think this is one of the drawbacks of being a professor. You just speak, 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 and you're not in touch with. But thanks for that feedback. I think okay. All right. So this is the next slide, which is basically interdisciplinary studies, which I'm very, very excited to be discussing with all of you. Interdisciplinary studies involves integrating knowledge, methods, and insights from multiple academic disciplines to address complex problems, create new understandings, and foster innovation. Unlike traditional education, which often isolates subjects, interdisciplinary subjects encourage a holistic approach to learning. When we're talking about a new world, creating education in a new world, creating transformation, one sec, stop sharing the screen. If we're talking about creating education in a new world, creating transformation in a new world, or creating change in a new world, and I'm sure all of us in this panel and all of our audiences also are exactly looking at the same thing, because any person who is on the embarkment of educating themselves is not just educating themselves for themselves, but it's also educating themselves for the community, for the society, for the social well-being of people, right? And if all of these things have to come together, this means we have to create a new reality in education, which also means we have to stop parroting and stop replicating the Western education for like a lot of courses, I feel. And no matter in which country you are, but if all of us can bring these principles together, principles of equity, transformation, bridging the social sciences and the humanities with the sciences, I think that's a real good starting point for anyone who is in the education sector or wants to aspire to be in the education sector or aspires to create a transformation in the world. I think these are the things, and with that, I'm going to stop. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Aadya. If anyone has any question, one short question we can have. I think no one has a question, but we will listen to more of your perspective on interdisciplinary studies in the panel discussion. Shortly, we will have it.
Sure.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Aadya. Can we have Dr. Rajendra? Yeah. So, yes. Yeah, I have found you. Yes. So our final speaker is here from the world of practice again, and he is Dr. Rajendra Deshpande, and he has completed a PhD in Gandhian thought and peace study from University of Gujarat, and he is a visiting faculty in many of the institutes in Pune and Aurangabad for management and marketing courses. He has developed a model for social value development and published several papers in various national and international conferences. He is also nominated by the Harvard Squares for the Leaders Excellence. So welcome, Dr. Rajendra. We are so excited to hear from you, and you are going to talk about business value development perspective in multidisciplinary education and sustainable development, which is
Thank
so
you.
yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. Can I share my screen?
Yes, you can. Just give me one second. Yeah, you can share. Yes, you can.
Thank you very much. I'm very much delighted to talk to you about business value perspective in multidisciplinary education. I first want to welcome all the participants who have joined on my invitation, especially Dr. Rajput, Dr. Dasgupta, Hemant Taule, Dr. Shobha Shinde. I am very much thankful for sparing your time on a Saturday weekend to join me for this session on business value development. Business value development is a very innovative area, and there are hardly any speakers in the world. I'm not boasting, but it's a fact. And that's why LinkedIn has categorized me among the top 1% consultants in the world. And people have always waited for my lectures in all the conferences and different sessions. Thank you very much again. And let us start. Today we will talk about multidisciplinary education and sustainable development, business value perspective with business value perspective. See, most of the students, researchers, with my experience and interactions with them in different institutions, including IITs, IIMs, and different management educations and social sciences, Tata Institute of Social Science and all, they are a little bit not, I will not say confused, but they are overwhelmed with the concept of multidisciplinary education, and faculties and the institutions are facing some challenges on how to integrate them into the basic of the stream that they have joined, whether especially in the BTech science and technology and engineering backgrounds, they want to do multidisciplinary, how to integrate them. I am myself, let me tell you, I am myself a pharmacy graduate. I am a management postgraduate, MBA from Bajaj Institute. And I am a researcher in social sciences. I have myself practiced and experienced multidisciplinary education, and then I am talking about it.
Dr. Rajendra, we
Yes.
can't see your slide. So,
Okay, you cannot see?
yeah, it just shows black screen. So you have started sharing, but we can't see the slide.
You can see now?
No. Is anyone else can see? No, I can't see.
No, we
If-
can't see. We can't see.
No, it's
We're not
not
able to
visible
see.
right now.
So
It's
if
not
We
visible.
can't see, sir. We can't see.
Oh, wait a minute. Wait a minute.
I think there is a network issue.
I will restart. Just a minute.
yes, it is visible now.
Yes. Thank you. And thank you for pointing it out. Now we will quickly move. We are short of time. We will quickly move ahead. So people, students are confused and overwhelmed with how to connect the dots of multidisciplinary education. We will have a brief review in the first part about what is business value development, how it can be implemented, and how it connects the dots. And then in the next part, we will talk about design thinking and different aspects of research and thinking types and strategies for research in different faculties and education. During my interaction with Peter Drucker, he had mentioned especially very profound statement that the greatest danger in the times of turbulence is not the turbulence, the way you act yourself, the way you think yourself. This is a very, very important statement because as the times are changing, our thinking patterns have to change. And in education, this is the most important aspect that we should change. We should transform our way we approach our challenges. You will find that in the new normal, our experiences have changed. Experiences in all the major areas of our life, it has changed. And we must accept that the way we deal the things, way we do the things has transformed after in the new normal. Now, why experiences are important? Experiences trigger our emotions, and these emotions are the cause of the decisions. In spite of this technological advance, you will find that 70% of our decisions are based on emotions and not rationality or technology or anything. And this is a very important aspect of decision making. Why decision making is important? Because all our decisions are important for the markets and the consumers and the corporates that they are selling their products. Another important aspect that we observed in the recent phenomena that 67% of our consumers have made the decisions based on business value and not brands. So even the brand marketing is taking hit because of business value, and 67% of our consumers, they have made the decisions based on the business value and not brands. Another important observation is that more than 2/3 of recruitment on LinkedIn does not require graduation. And you will find that the rush for degrees and qualifications and this, it is there. There is no doubt about it. But people are in the education sector moving for value and what is the outcome of our efforts. So the world is slowly but certainly moving towards value, and the markets are now turning to value rather than from need based and other aspects. Now we must see that what drives your career. Most of the students, when you ask this question, why you have taken admission here, he is not able to answer, he is confused. And there is nothing wrong or right in this question. People are driven by their values. And when the circumstances keep changing, what remains more or less constant is your value pillars and value drivers. Everybody does not know what I am driven for, what are my drivers, what are my pillars. You have to take efforts for finding these value pillars and value drivers. Another important aspect, the students of multidisciplinary education and all the faculties also must focus on in today's competition, that what are my marketing and presentation abilities, what are my achievements, what are the areas of demonstration of talents, what are the trends in the current trends in the industry that you want to aspire for, and what is your ability to seize these opportunities and connect your talents and abilities to the industry and present your value proposition. This is a very basic thing that students need to adapt to. What is business value? It is a combination of holistic factors of your business, of your career. It is not just a product, degree, or anything. You have to give consideration for holistic factors, and this is, all of you will agree that this is most important in multidisciplinary education. In fact, multidisciplinary education is driving you towards holistic life. Students also have to, and faculties also, they have to remember now that your attendance is not a success. Your attention in the class is important. Your marks and your grades is part of your success, and more than that, your understanding of the topic, understanding of the subject is required. Your placement, final placement is not the indication of your success. What career design you make and what career progress you make, that is the mark of your success. This is very important because we are all of us, we have been driven by grade systems, memory systems of education, which will take slowly. It is important, no doubt, but it will take a little bit of back seat and side seats in the institution. We are all been thinking traditionally. We look at our children in this perspective of marks and grades that will have to be transformed. Another important aspect of business value aspect is, according to psychology, there are 4 types of intelligences: IQ, emotional quotient, social quotient, and adversity quotient. However, most of the parents, they focus on developing IQ for their children. Nowadays, after you get a job, after you get graduation, you are starting focusing on emotional quotient, social quotients, and adversity quotients. Your ability to face adversity is another important aspect that will be looked into in the multidisciplinary education. What is the model? I will just in a minute explain you what is the business value development model for your career development. We find your values, then we sense the opportunities and find out the gaps in the opportunity, which is gaps in the value delivery. That is the area of opportunity, and we train you in developing this. How does business value development impacts career? It takes a holistic view of your career, and it finds out value pillars and drivers of your researchers and the research model, developing a research model and career model that is specific for the individual. Most important, what to focus. There was a lecture on perspective, there was a lecture on biases, sorry, not perspective, biases, and there was a lecture before me on different aspects of multidisciplinary education. Most important thing to remember here is what is the perspective. It is the perspective that shapes your bias. And many of us tend to now I will not say ignore, we get to forget about what perspective. When you are present about our perspective, that shapes our communication, thinking, actions, and everything about it. Now, what we should attach to, most of the young students today, they are attached to a position, they are attached to a company, they are attached to different physical aspects of careers, and there is nothing wrong in it, that, but you have to travel through these goals through mission and through your vision. Now, these are very, very vague words for the students, but we can train the students at the undergraduate level for developing their mission. It is very important in multidisciplinary education, and the choices, vast information, vast data. It is very important to train the students to focus on this. And business value, it is business value that gives you the access for developing this. Next, now 3 dimensions of education are knowledge, skills, attitudes, values. They get combined to develop your competencies, and these competencies help you to develop your actions and career choices. This is again a pyramid of developing your relationships and education in dimensions of your individuality and choices in multidisciplinary. What is the outcome of business value development? You develop your presentation speech. You are clear about why you have made your choices in your career. And this is very, very important for developing the students. Another transformation is creating a pull effect for your career, for your target audience. This is every time you go to any education institute, go to any institute, you ask the students to speak about themselves for 2 minutes and 3 minutes. You will find the monotony in the presentations that they are making. This is very important. Life cycle. Nobody today is talking about life cycle of a career. You will find that careers are changing faster than before today, and we have to address this issue. Every time the student and the participants is not able to revise, continuing education is not that practiced in all the faculties of our conferences and symposiums, seminars, workshops. They are also need to be reviewed about what is the focus. Another important aspect students need to develop is teamwork. Are you working in your career or are you working on your career, especially the research projects? They need to be trained and developed in this area of combined efforts, sharing knowledge, and different aspects of teamwork. We will now move to design thinking. This is a very important area that teachers especially need to look into this area. Develop business design thinking, develop business value development perspective, develop holistic view of your research education and challenges. And new normal requires new type of thinking. You have to drop the old way you think and approach the problems in researches and different methodology. Design thinking can be adopted by anyone, not just by technology designers. When I use the word design thinking, many people think about technology, products, or anything, but design thinking can be in social sciences, design thinking can be in political sciences, design thinking can be in English teaching, design thinking can be in any branch of education and any faculty. What is design thinking? Design thinking is an interactive process which seeks to understand the users and the challenges, assumptions, redefine problems in attempt to identify alternative strategies and solutions that might not instantly be apparent with our initial level of understanding. It is a way of thinking and working and the collection of hands in our methods. What are the steps in design thinking? The steps are empathize. Empathizing is the understanding of the situation and problem with the student's perspective, not your perspective. Ideate, creating a challenge assumptions, creating ideas and innovative solutions for education and for delivery of your curriculum. Create prototypes, create solutions, create modules. This is what is especially in the multidisciplinary education. I had written a paper and chapter for this, how to deliver multidisciplinary education. This is a challenge. Teaching political science to a technology students, teaching social science to a technology students, teaching technology to social science students, teaching computer technology and marketing and sales and businesses to social is sometimes really a challenge. And we have to have a design thinking approach for delivering the modules. What are the challenges? giving Western examples. We talk about Google, we talk about Microsoft examples, and this Warren Buffett and all. They students in India, they don't relate with them. They relate with next door shop. We have to give examples from our Indian models. This we have to understand and practice. Connect with the topic through business value development perspective, that is a holistic perspective, and what the students are going to get delivered about by these multidisciplinary approaches and the particular topic or subject that is being delivered. Give the examples that students are able to connect with in everyday life. Interaction design. This is about the design of interaction between user, the product, the course, the curriculum, and this is about shaping the experience of the student, what his outcome is going to get and what defining outcomes is happening. Be in the student state of mind. We have to understand and work on the visualization of students' mindsets and what they are understanding. Now, 5 dimensions of interaction and delivery of design thinking. Number 1, it is your words, the choice of words that you are using. Number 2 is your visual representations of what you are teaching, what you are delivering, whether it is images, whether it is graphics, whether it is videos, whether it is questions, or whether it is a live example. You are taking a visit of the students to a unit or to a market or to whatever place. Physical objects and space. How students interact with you. What is the medium they are using? This is especially important in online teaching and hybrid teaching. Time is another important variable in the interaction. Change of media in between the sessions, animation, videos, sounds, learning is impacted by all these platforms. Lastly, behavior, mechanism of product software and useful for technology students. This is especially important when you are using technology platforms for delivery of your modules, because all the students do not relate in the same perspective with the technology that you are using for delivering the modules. Tools. What can students do with their mouse, fingers, and devices? You have to find out and you have to inculcate that in your teaching. How to use colors for differentiation of your education. How to spot the errors made by, because error is a perception by the, when most of us are tuned to comment on errors and we are typing and designing our behaviors to using the communication to criticize the students. I will quickly go through the holistic approach and its importance. I have used the example in one of my sessions, how your hand represents the holistic education model. Every finger has a different purpose. For example, there are 5 fingers in the hand. Thumb, our thumb is a significance of your strength of your character. Next is your index finger. Our index finger is about the focus that we want to make. Middle finger is odd and it is supposed to be obscene to use middle finger, but middle finger is sometimes represents your take care of your brand and your identity. Ring finger is not more or less is about considered as a marriage and ring and relationship, but it is indicating in your education, holistic education, what relationships are you developing with your colleagues, with your peers, with your teachers and with different stakeholders in your education, your parents and all. Lastly, little finger, it is used as the difference that you make in the long run and in the short run with your education. This is a chart. I will go through, just skip through it about how to verify your new ideas that you get. These are some of the codes, and how to you climb the mountain is more important. I will skip through this. This is not important. Multidisciplinary approach in the innovations. I will go, this is interesting. There are different types of innovations that you need to train your students about. There are 9 dimensions of innovations. And you can, when students are categorizing their innovations, you can use this approach. First is your product. You can innovate on product, develop a new product. You can innovate. Second type is your process, how you make the things, how you teach the things, how students solve the problems. This can be innovation. Recently, I have posted a video on my LinkedIn account. You can have a visit on how innovative and different lateral thinking approaches arise with the students. Organization, how evolving a new type of organization. There are so many NGOs and innovative work going on in the different areas. Services, innovator services. Take the example of Ola, Uber, and different Swiggy and Zomato, how they have innovated the services. Next is the disruption of the services, existing services. And 7th is outcome drive. Outcome drive is you want certain outcome and you design the product depending on this outcome. Next is incremental, how small changes in your product can develop an entirely new innovation. And lastly, breakthrough, making a breakthrough. These are 9 types of innovations. Now, how to get access to this innovative thinking? Innovative thinking needs to be trained and needs to be developed a focus upon. And this you can develop with train your students with 6 type of different thinking that you can have in your teaching. And identify, be most important thing in this is be present to your thinking and be present to your communication that is happening.
Yeah, Dr. Rajendra, if you could
There are
please.
6 type of thinkings. I will not elaborate. Yes.
Yeah.
White thinking, red hat thinking, and these are 6 different types of thinking that needs to be developed and trained about. And lastly, students need to be trained about is the financial freedom. How to get access to your financial freedom. It is now we are introducing this program in schools in US. Our proposal is pending for consideration. There are few schools who are adopting training the students for earning their own life. Then business value approach is you start taking decisions from wisdom and knowledge. Right now we train the students about information and data. As you move upwards, your quality of decision improves. Next is your ability to delay the gratification. There is a 2-minute story I will take. This is a famous experiment in psychology of psychology 1960s. A teacher entered the class with chocolates and he asked the students that I am going to leave these chocolates with you. You can eat it. But however, those who don't eat after 10 minutes I come, I will give them double the chocolates. And some of the he leaves, some of the students take the chocolate and some of the there are 5-10 students who wait for teacher to come, and the experiment is not over. The gratification delay, the students were tracked for next 25 years, and they found that students who waited for the chocolates, they performed very well in careers, jobs, and different skills. So this is a impact of value development that you get in your education, this your career. So the goal is not to be just successful, the goal is to make you valuable. Thank you. These are my credentials of certifications from Harvard.
Thank you so much.
This is United Nations Sustainability Development. This is my award from World Association of Small and Medium Enterprises. This is the certificate from LinkedIn for top 1% rank. And thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Rajan. And I think now we can have the panel and people can ask directly questions to the panel.
Yes.
Please
yes.
stay on.
Thank you.
Just adding all the speakers on the screen. Yeah, again. We have one more. So I think Marcelle has. Oh yeah. Good. Yeah. Right.
Thank you once again to all the participants who have made it convenient to attend my presentation.
So
Yes.
yeah, so we would invite participants if they have any questions to the panel, but we would definitely like to hear from each one of you because we are already nearing the time of the completion. So what are the one critical challenge and the opportunity that you see for interdisciplinary research to grow and really which make all of us to come together and work together and succeed in that direction?
I have left my contact in the chat box. Those who are interested in contacting me, you can contact.
Yeah, sure.
Thank you.
So who would like to start?
Am I audible?
Yeah, you are.
Okay. I think one of the foremost challenges.
Sorry, Aadya, can you please unmute?
Sorry, am I audible?
Yes.
Perfect. I think one of the challenges that you asked, and the most pertinent challenge in the entire education industry right now, not just in India, but I think throughout the globe, is policy. Because every government has a very different education policy. And while it's a very fancy thing to believe that, every government is going to be aligned with the same policy structures. But I think the first step is to bring about an extensive reformation through the space of policy making in education. So as I've told all of you, I come from India, and I'm very happy to say that at least the the government which we have right now also, it's absolutely pro policy and pro reformation, right? So I think the first step is to bring a transformation through the lens of policy, because as all of us are talking about transformation and creating new realities, I think it's very important to be looking at this huge problem from a global perspective. So I have a solution, but this solution also has few limitations. But policy making and awareness, and also just one last thing which I feel is the entire act of unlearning, because I don't think anyone in today's times is any less competent from the other person. Everyone is equally competent, right? And in this, in this game of who is more competent, I think a holistically successful person is that who is sociologically and culturally more competent than someone who's just more competent through, their educationally, qualification wise. That would be my response.
Yeah. Thank you, Aadya.
Thanks, Dr. Shabana Khan.
Yeah. So, Shaheen, Marcelle. Yeah.
Can I share, Shabana?
Yeah,
And Mala?
Yes.
Oh, I'm not allowed. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm not allowed.
No, it's okay. You can just let the speaker speak, and then you can also comment. Yeah.
All right, all right, all right.
Thank you.
If I may, Shabana,
Yeah.
I think that the fact is that when we are working in our own fields area, we're very focused on our career, and we are specialists in our domain. And sometimes when we communicate our research, it's written in a jargon that might not be accessible to others, you know.
Okay.
And then this is a barrier to making connection with others who might be interested in the field. And I think it is important that when we educate young scientists, that they learn how to communicate their research to other scientists and to the public in general, and to government also, because their research might be of interest to policymakers, to practitioners. So this is one of the ways I think that we can increase these interdisciplinary research and interest by having we talk about soft skills, and Aadya talk about integrating that in education. And I think this is very important, that we learn about different fields, different research areas early on in our career. And it's also important that we do not separate social sciences and hard sciences. This is in our cultures, you know, people want to become engineers, want to become doctors, but there are other fields that are very important. Even if you go into these streams, pathways, you still need a background in social sciences, in philosophy, to take you forward in life. This is extremely important. And this is where researchers working together from different disciplines would be very helpful.
Thank you, Shaheen. Marcelle, would you like to add?
So I do believe that communication is probably the answer that we're looking for, and the confidence to be in communication with many people. When I work with my company interns, we have them select a topic, and then we ask them to do an informal presentation, a business report, a speech, and a presentation using PowerPoint, etc. And they get a week to do all 5. And I tell you, they step up. They just step up.
Yeah,
when
louder.
the demand is made, they do it. And then when they go into their university, then they have those skills. So I do agree with what you're saying. While I don't have the answer for how to network, I do think that whatever your project is, whatever your research is, if there was a place where you could almost just register it or pitch, I guess is a way, put a 1-minute tiny little speech on what you're up to in a place where other people can do the same thing, then I think there's a chance for cross-pollination and then working together and building something amazing.
Yeah, awesome. Totally agree. Dr. Rajendra, would you like to add? You have to unmute.
To be present and invite the attention is that in all the 4 sessions, the commonest it was about the communication, and for building positive communication, what we require is a define our focus and define our perspective. Most important aspect of our behavior and our personality is the perspective that you develop. That is most important. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And I think some of the participants also wanted to speak, Mala. Dr. Hemant, or anyone has any question? Yeah, Shobhaji, yes. I'm just
Yeah.
adding.
Thank you. It has been very interesting. A question which plagues Indian education system is the link of higher education with employability. So what do the experts think of it? And the other thing I suggest is that when we talk about interdisciplinarity, the humanities and the social sciences emphasize more on the theoretical rather than the experiential aspect of education. And so methodologies have to be changed when we talk about interdisciplinarity and multidisciplinarity. Thank you.
Anyone would like to answer that?
Ma'am, absolutely, I agree with you, and thank you so much for bringing that question. Opens up a lot of new realms. But I also feel that, in the last 10 years, especially in India, if you look at it, the entire landscape of education is changing. I mean, we are changing as educators, as policymakers. Of course, the change is slow and gradual, but it's definitely there. If, for example, I work for GD Goenka University. I've been here since last 7 years, and it's a private organization that I work for. And GD Goenka as a brand is also into a lot of philanthropy and all of these things. But I feel that so I did my undergraduation from Delhi University, and at that point of time, this was in 2010. At that point of time, the entire existence of methods and methodologies was something which was kind of rote. But uske baad, when I have also grown up in my career, and now in 2023-24, things are definitely changing from the perspective of central universities also and private universities also. The only thing which I feel, ma'am, is that as an individual and as an educator, you have to keep yourself very aware. And instead of learning new things, as I always say, you should have the freedom and the flexibility and the non-rigidness to unlearn structures, to unlearn things, to unlearn epistemologies, to unlearn the entire nuances, to pick up something new. And I think any educator who's doing that is in a right way of thinking. And yeah, and that is the way also we can talk about interdisciplinary connects and intersectionality, because that is the future. Without intersectionality, there is nothing. No matter you talk about STEM, you talk about commerce, you talk about humanities, you can't exist. That is what I feel.
Yeah. Thank you, Dr. Aadya. Anyone
Thanks,
else
thanks,
like
Dr.
to add to that?
Can I say something, Shabana?
Yeah, yeah.
Mala?
Yes, yes.
So I have heard every speaker, and what I want to share is that when we talk about today's education, nowadays materialistic education is taking over. So normally when we teach, we follow a syllabus. So materialistic education systems lacks compassion, and it kills imagination, and it also molds most of us to think alike and gulp ideas ready-made, which is already there, the widely used social media which affects our lifestyle and consumption. And since our opinions and thoughts are formed mostly based on these things that we see and experience around us, this centralization directly conditions us to conform and follow certain rules, which then, become our culture. And now, what I have also perceived, and in my perspective, our decision is not purely ours. They are already there in the universe. They are already floating in the universe. Most of us, we simply catch them. So time demands that, we become wise, because for some nothing is good and bad, and for some it may be good, for some it may be bad, like for example, killing a terrorist who's harming innocent person is good, it is not bad, although it is against the simple norms that we are killing a human being, but then it is good. So what I am a philosophy student, so I would like to I would like to say something what I have read. There was a philosopher, his name was Nietzsche, and he said, do not allow yourself to be deceived. Great minds are all skeptical. So this is all from my side. This I wanted to share. Thank you, Shabana.
Yeah,
And
thank
thank you, everybody.
I think it
Yeah.
also relates to what Marcel said. Like, so we don't have our own cognitive biases, but we are also influenced by others' cognitive biases.
Yes, and in this labyrinth of life, what we receive through our physical senses can be so deceiving that what we perceive are easily manipulated. And I learned that ignorance is the root cause of suffering for for
So,
all of us.
yeah.
Yeah.
So
So
Marcel,
thank
would
you.
you like to add to that? Like, how should, like, Mala is a parent also, student also of philosophy. So how at the local level people can deal with their cognitive biases when they see like their biases are also manipulated, you know?
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah. So mostly, so there's a way. What we're looking for is to be able to intervene on our automatic thinking processes. And ways to do that would be to ask questions. And the questions need to be introspective. So how many different solutions can I think of? If I was a king with all power, how would I solve this problem? If I was an actress on the screen dancing, how would I approach this? To get out of yourself, to use characters maybe from books and stories. How would Superman deal with this problem? How would this religious entity deal with this problem? So you take yourself away from your automatic thinking and imagine how other people would deal with whatever you're dealing with. And that will give you access to being outside of your own biases. So that's a practice you could take on at a local level.
Awesome. And Soma Kumari, yeah, please ask.
Hello, everyone. Hello, Shabana. I hope
Yes,
you remember me. I'm from Kamla Nehru College, Dr. Soma.
yes, definitely.
Actually, I completely resonate with the kind of ideas and thoughts that have been shared here. And I'm also quite concerned about certain things with respect to education, the way it is being, especially like in our country, and why to kind of widen it, but maybe to our specific context. For instance, I'm not just an educator, but also as a parent. I'm quite concerned because I have school going like children. And what especially Shobha ma'am and Balaji said, I resonate with that completely, that it has become very materialistic, the way it is being given to provided in schools. And so and like students are actually like made like in that system, they are actually like more of allowing their thinking to grow, that free thinking. It's more about like machines that they are being kind of like moved on towards, rather than having their own thinking. Because, and this completely as a parent I have been seeing that there are like very limited scope time for that self study and such things, because it's always like spoon feeding sort of a thing which is there. Like there are like textbooks, and then there are also contents which generally teachers share. And especially post this pandemic, that lot of online materials have been circulated. So definitely it requires a lot of like changes. And of course, like what I'm talking, maybe a very limited like a sort of like context, because one school and things, and there are definitely very good schools who are actually working towards holistic development, and maybe also taking care of some of the biases that have been also been like talked about here. So, but then of course, when we look at the realities, and also due to this pandemic, COVID, I will definitely refer to that, because that has influenced a lot of our existence, especially the education system. post-pandemic. That even though that pandemic, like we are offline mode, we are still continuing to be that online. So this kind of like platform definitely gives us that scope. But like providing those materials and education through like these online platforms definitely limits that scope of that thinking that goes on in our traditional classroom like classes, which actually has stopped happening. That's what I want to say. And uh like maybe a seminar like this is a required thing, and definitely maybe a very limited like group of people, but it definitely requires to talk about. So thank you for giving this opportunity. And yes, thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing your views. And I really want to thank all the speakers for taking out your time and being here for more than 3 hours and, sharing your views. So with this, we would like to complete the session, and we have a next session coming up in August. So we will look forward to hear from all of you. Please stay in touch, and thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.